Welcome to the Know Your Ship podcast, presented by eHub. I'm your host, Frank Dolce. Welcome back. Man, you guys are in for a treat with our special guest who had to make extensive travel plans to be here, which we really appreciate. That was so thoughtful. And I just feel like sitting down in front of somebody makes for a much more meaningful conversation. Maybe you can judge that afterwards, I guess.
I love it. I've done countless podcasts, and I think this is only the second time, and it's the first time in a studio. So I'm pumped about this. This is worth every minute of getting on a plane for.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we are honored to have Jonathan Briggs, who is the head of sales and solutions at Nimble AI. Well, let me ask you about that, because we know you as Nimble AI, and we've worked together for a little bit now, and it's been a really nice partnership, but we know you as Nimble AI. Are you still Nimble AI, or are you switching over to kind of Nimble robotics?
Great question. We're actually just going to Nimble.
Just Nimble?
Just Nimble.
Okay.
And then it lets us get a little bit wider in what we're doing in the future. So we are leaving the AI in the background, but we are still very much an AI company.
It's very nimble.
Very nimble. That is exactly it. We try to live up to our name as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about Nimble just really quickly. High level, 30,000 foot. Tell us about Nimble, what you guys do, a little bit of the history, and then we'll start moving on in the podcast.
No, it sounds good. So been around since 2017, and we have had a bunch of kind of roadmaps along the way, or road stops, or however you want to say that on the roadmap, and began initially just trying to figure out, could we teach robots human-like skills? So we started with somebody else's hardware, and we added vision systems, and then all the tactile things that we take for granted, we applied to a robot, so we could pick tens of millions of units without stopping, without breaking down, without people having to be involved with it. But we have a long-term focus to be an end-to-end autonomous supply chain company.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the starting point. And as we morphed and created a full-on hardware stack ourselves in a category of automation called ASRS, or automated storage and retrieval systems, in came another roadmap to become a 3PL powered by all of our own hardware and software and capabilities. And as you can imagine, when you ask for hundreds of thousands of somebody's square feet and tens of millions of dollars, nobody wants to be your first customer. And so we also, at the same time, you look out, there's this kind of forgotten middle of the middle market of customers that don't have the volume or the cash flow to invest in this type of capabilities. And so they kind of get stuck in a very stagnant 3PL environment where it's very manual, very laborsome, and it's really an industrial engineering play. And so they kind of get left to the side because the ROI would never be there for them, but they could benefit gratefully from what we do. So we're in that next journey, or next phase of the journey, where we've built out the 3PL network and we're bringing brands into our warehouses, and then slowly heading into another phase where we can then sell a robotic system to a brand, or we can sell fulfillment to a brand, is kind of where we're branching off.
Gotcha. Okay. And I noticed that you do have this startup functionality. So a company that, like you said, may not have the capital to invest, may not have the resources available, or don't think they have the resources available. You give them an easy path into the robotics fulfillment space.
Oh, absolutely. Because we're not asking for upfront capital. We've already capitalized the business, and we have a very market competitive transactional based price for a system that uses about 1/8 of the people as a traditional 3PL, and about 1/4 of the size of the building. And so we're very much in control of our costs long term. And so you come in, and just like any other 3PL, you have a fee for the typical things of like receiving, picking, packing, storing, et cetera. And we do that. And instead of asking for a whole bunch of money up front, we're not doing that. And that's always been the hurdle of somebody in that middle segment wanting to do it, because they'd have to invest tens of millions up front. And then how many years does that take to get an ROI? And what if it's not the right automation, so on and so forth? So then they stay status quo.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So how many facilities do you have?
So currently 3. We have an East, West, and Central. So
Okay.
we've got California, we have Texas, and we have New Jersey, which gives us what we call our MVP of a 2-day network. So we're living at
Yep.
about 96%
Right.
on the ground. We can get to 2 days or less.
Yeah, that's amazing. And in those 3 facilities, how many packages are your robots touching on a daily basis?
Well, in some form or fashion, 100%, right? Because at least on the pick side, we're 100% doing automation to make the pick happen. So I do not deploy any pickers in a in an e-com warehouse, which just sounds crazy to say that,
Yeah.
but 0 pickers live in my warehouse. So at least in some instances, we're going to at least pick it. There are some scenarios where we're getting more and more automation rolled out as we live on this end-to-end autonomous journey, and so we figured out some profiles that we can pack with robotics. So I've got some of our volume it actually goes from pick through put a shipping label on it and goes to shipping without any person intervening with that order whatsoever. So very, very exciting stuff.
It kind of makes me feel bad because I grew up in this industry going into warehouses and watching all the pickers do the job.
Hmm.
And it was fascinating to watch that. And now we're going to all robotics but let me ask you this, because with human pickers, there is some error that occurs. Have you been able to calculate or analyze the difference instituting a robotic platform versus human pickers and the error percentage that you create or manage?
Well, the industry is all over the map. We see anywhere from, 0.5% to 5% error rate. The challenge that comes if you can execute very well with people, but it's very costly to do it well with people because they institute a whole bunch of quality controls and quality audits of somebody else checking it a second time, somebody else weighing it a third time, and so on and so forth. So you could be close to 100% without any automation, but you're going to pay a lot to get it. So it's a
Hmm.
balancing act of doing it very effectively and efficiently, as well as doing it very cost effectively. And
Yeah.
that's where we at. So we live kind of 98.8, 98.9% from a
Efficiency.
from a an order accuracy standpoint
Gotcha.
and inventory accuracy.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we'll dig into a little bit more of that as we go along, but I want to start with your background a little. It feels like you have reached this place of kind of alignment in your career. Obviously, you're very excited about the company and what you're doing and your particular role, and I think that's important to talk about. Actually, before we get to that, is it true that the founder of Nimble is a Stanford dropout?
That is true. Don't look down upon them. It's
No, all good startups have start with that story. I was an MBA school, I was a college dropout. That's how it seems to go. And
he
there's
was
just
onto something, and his
so he
well,
said, I'm wasting my time in the classroom. I'm going to go do this
well, here's what's I think even greater about this story is it's his advisor that advised him to drop out
at Stanford.
at Stanford, who's also on our board.
Oh, well,
So
sure.
she saw the greatness and the genius and said, "Hey, you don't need the letters after your name. Let's get after it, right? It's that time." And it's a good thing we did, right? Because if you look then what came next in 2020, 2021 with COVID,
Mm,
and you now are several years in the making and you're ahead of that, that's
mhm.
really what helped us, get to the next level from that perspective. So, not that you want to wish everybody to drop out of school, and I don't think any of the educators want to hear that, but I think the most important part of that is the advisor gave the right advisement and put together what on track or on course this company that has no stop in it really.
Yeah, and the pandemic certainly was an interesting time for the shipping world. As lots of industries were suffering, the world of shipping took a pretty significant increase. And so Nimble being positioned in the industry at the beginning of the pandemic, I'm assuming that also helped the growth of the company.
Oh, for sure. It helped the whole growth of the industry, at least from
Yes,
automation
no
and
doubt.
robotics. I think it moved it up 10, if
It
not
was
15
ridiculous.
years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no question. Okay, let's get into your background. Now, are you a Midwest kid? You grew up in the Midwest?
Well, no, but I've lived there since '05, and I'm teetering on that edge of living there longer than anywhere else,
Oh, yeah.
but I still have yet to like really embrace it as being home. I think at some point in time I've got to lean into this. Like I've got 3 kids that are going to graduate in a handful of years. Like I do need to own it, but really grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania, just outside of Scranton, so home of The Office.
Nice.
Long before obviously The Office was around,
Yes.
but some of those clips are real, and so there's actual footage of the town. So grew up there, lived in a handful of years down in South Carolina, Clemson University. Um, and actually, all while this was happening, I started in high school loading and unloading trucks at UPS
In
and
high school,
in
yeah.
high school, worked my way up into operations with them. So while I was, even when in high school, working nights at UPS, day job, day school, night job, then stayed around for a couple of years to go to a community college just to stay on where I was at,
Mhm.
transferred to go to Clemson University. So I was working in logistics all while I was going to school to pay for it. So I think it was funny when you said you're, old school, you walked into warehouses and I started loading and unloading
You were the
trucks.
guy.
Yeah, I was in there. Yeah.
Yeah, wearing the brown uniform. Did you have to wear the brown uniform?
Only they were smart enough not to have me go down that pathway. Only during peak seasons when it was like the bottom, like the last guy. Oh, we're down to Jonathan Briggs. Send him in. That's how bad it was. So they
Yes.
never gave me a day job of driving. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Um,
They could see.
they knew.
They knew early
They knew.
on.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're so successful.
Exactly. They knew how to like pivot people around. So they put me in sales. They saw that I was not much of an operations person, and after I graduated, they immediately put me into sales and got me out of the operations, so I couldn't screw anything up after that.
Gotcha. Is there any family background? Parents, brothers, sisters, anyone who was in the logistics industry?
No, no. Parents, grew up in farms and then construction, second generation. So, and logistics, I thought I was going to go to school for engineering and kind of stumbled in this thing. I was an exchange student to Mexico and I did an extra year of studying abroad. And so I
Mhm.
did my true senior year of high school in Mexico, was advised to take a 5th year of high school.
Mhm.
And so the reason I got into UPS is I went to the job center down in Scranton, said, "Hey, I'd like to be a translator." And they're like, "Well, we don't have any jobs. Nobody speaks Spanish here, so that's not going to do anything. UPS is in the back. Would you want to go interview? Are you 18 years old?" And I'm like, "Well, I am." So I thought it was going to be a summer job. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
next thing you know, I worked 7 years there. I've been in this industry now since '98. Yeah, so completely, that whole go to Mexico for a year changed my whole trajectory. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so did you grow up on a were you a farmer? Through
No,
construction?
adjacent to farming, my first job as a elementary student was the QA guy. Well, they didn't call it QA guy, but the guy that followed the planting machine of tomatoes to make sure that either it didn't miss a spot or that it was put upside down. You had to flip it over and put the roots down in the ground. So I walked behind, following a tractor up and down rows, fixing the mistakes of people that were feeding a machine. So as very early on was doing that, but that was not a family farm. That was a neighbor farm.
But the machine was planting.
Machine was
So
planting
that's your first that is your exposure to robotics.
pretty much.
Would you say that?
I mean, when you look back and think about it, yes, that is. And the only thing is you had people like driving that process. So like
Uh-huh.
they'd have to insert it and they'd want to see if you were awake. So they would purposely put them upside down. So you'd be like, so if they got mad at you or whatever, then next thing you got a whole row upside down and you're just like bending over every 2 seconds trying to fix all their mistakes. But yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, don't make the guy in the seat mad that's feeding the thing or you're going to be doing a lot of work.
Do you incorporate that with Nimble today? Do you have the robots make mistakes every once in a while to see if the quality control people are on it?
Well, we definitely do. I personally don't. Other than when I do tours, like I always make sure our ops, we're always focused on quality, quality, quality. Make sure we never make mistakes. And so I purposefully make when we do our demos, say, hey, can you show us what happens if we put this in the wrong
Oh.
location, we scan this wrong? Because I want our would-be customers to know that like there's a lot of foolproof stuff
Yeah.
that stops it, alarms go off, it like sends flags up, like fix this. So we purposely do that in the tours.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, so you went through high school and college kind of working with UPS. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yeah, so 7 years, went 98 to 05, six of the 7 years in operations. What I did then does not exist there anymore. We manually developed driver routes with paper and color coded them
Oh, man.
with a to load chart with a highlighter.
So nostalgic.
Yes, and there's not even like, and we'd put paper up on the back of a truck, and it would be a load chart. It would take us like 3 to 6 months to get somebody to learn how to load a truck properly.
Oh my gosh.
They're up and running in like minutes now. It's so
Right.
automated, it's crazy.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
And then did you go into sales at that point?
I did. So when I thought I was going to be an operator my whole life. I really did love operations, and I joked about it. That was bad. But I actually was a pretty good operator, and I thought I was going to run routes and run driver teams, and work my way up to all the different levels of operations. But thank goodness, a lady that was over our security team, she and I really connected, and she was very influential. And she's like, "Look, I know you have all these jobs lined up when you graduate," because UPS was very serious back then about you could only get to a certain level until you had a 4-year degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so I was planning on, so when I was going to return back to Scranton area, I had jobs lined up with people I used to work with there.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Look, give me a year, go into sales. You will, if you hate it, I'll give you whatever job you thought you were going to miss out on. Like, I'll take care of you." And so they held a job for me for several months because I officially hadn't graduated. I'm in my last semester, senior year. And so I graduated on a Friday. Monday, I'm promoted into sales. That's how legitimately serious they were about you having to have a degree.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so I got into there. So this is 04, and I did about a year in sales, and great because they trained you so well. Like, I went to months of sales training.
Great. Yeah.
And so learned like things like spin method. I don't know if that's a thing anymore.
Sure.
Neil
Mhm.
Rackman's spin selling.
Yep.
It's still my gospel. I know they've added so many different types there, but that's at that time UPS was all about it. So I learned what all the S and the P's and the I's and the N's and how to do that, and wrote all the scripts for sales. And so did that for a year. And then DHL Express had
Mhm.
taken over and acquired Airborne Express. So an
Right.
international company bought a domestic only company, and they were going to take on UPS. And my thought was, hey, they're like doing this in 219 countries. They're number one. Surely they
Yeah.
could be number one in the 220th.
Right.
And so a lot of UPS people were recruited to go over there. All the people that were kind of my mentors in sales then recruited me and said, "Hey, you got to come over here. You'll never regret it." So I moved from South Carolina to Ohio because they were going to be opening their version of like Memphis and Louisville
Mhm.
in Ohio, in a
Yeah.
small little town called Wilmington. They owned the airport. It was an old Air Force base. So here I am. We're going to take on the world.
Right.
The only carrier that owns their own airport. Like, surely we've got this thing, right? So this is 05. 08 happens. The economy just crashes. By the end of 08, they've shut the whole domestic network down.
Right.
Rolled that thing back up. 92% of the company laid off, and I'm going, oh, now what?
Yeah.
So I ended up at FedEx and spent 3 years there. Left there, said I'm never going to do logistics again. I am done. I went for about a year and a half with a customer of mine in a startup, and a good year and a half of working in startup land. Realized I really like logistics, and I want to get back into it. And was fortunate enough,
Yeah.
around 13, to get back in a company called DHL Global Mail,
Mhm.
that is now DHL e-commerce, another big partner of you guys.
Yeah.
And so a guy by the name of Rob Glover took a flyer on me, invested in me, and it was, it really changed my life. And that was really all things e-commerce, direct to consumer at that point. Tail end of that time, they were playing around with a guy by the name of Craig Morris, who's now the COO of DHL e-commerce,
Mhm.
was head of product at the time. And he was seeing that, like, hey, work share is kind of like in jeopardy, right? Everybody's heading towards 2-day, 1-day.
Yep.
Amazon and all the Prime was going on. And he goes, we've got this 3 to 5 day, and we've got a 3 to 8 day product. We're kind of on borrowed time here. So they rolled out 3 products in around 16, 17, 18 timeframe. One was a same day delivery service way ahead of its time called Parcel Metro. Best same day service I've ever seen. Just nobody wanted to buy it in 16 and 17. Everybody wanted it, but nobody
Way
wanted to pay
before
for
their
it.
time.
Way too early. So
Yeah.
that got sunsetted. They rolled out, which you guys know and love, Expedited Max in that same time frame.
Mhm.
And then they also said, you know what, we are struggling with first mile. We should do regionalized e-commerce fulfillment. And so they started a network with 3 nodes, East, West, Central, very, very similar sounding in my story.
Mhm.
And so they went a couple years, invested a lot of money, and weren't going very well. We got tapped on the shoulder by our CEO to say, hey, you've had a good success. We really like it. Would you come over here? Thought I went over with 18 months. Then they get a new global CEO like 5 months into this thing. and they're like, we're shutting this thing down. Like, this is terrible. Like, we're not doing this thing. So I was then fortunate enough, didn't have to leave DHL, but I decided that with transition like this, I'd fallen in love with in a handful of months with what was going on with fulfillment. Thought that was the next phase.
Sure.
Was introduced to a little company called Quiet Logistics.
Yeah.
Recently got bought by American Eagle, and so was there right after they got acquired by the PE firms, and so they were small at the time.
Yeah.
Two markets, 3 nodes, and
Yeah.
and we had a phenomenal growth story during that time, and then left there and got into robotics. And so now at Nimble is exactly what you're saying. My whole life's work has come together in what I do with the transportation,
Amazing.
with the operations, with the fulfillment, with the automation, with the products, all this stuff. So they entrust me to do a lot of different things. One, be the first go-to-market person of this fulfillment piece and the strategy.
Yeah.
The customer-facing product, I have a lot of the strategy around what our customers need and want with things like order management, transportation management, and warehouse management. And then I own the parcel strategy for the e-com business.
Wow.
So it sounds bizarre that a guy that's head of sales is also head of these things, but when you hear that 20-some year journey, it really has every single job that I've
Unbelievable.
done has come together in this role.
Starting with following the tomato machine.
And I forgot the tomato was really a big part of this. Absolutely.
Well, that's an amazing story, and amazing because we have a lot of themes that resonate on this podcast, and one of those is successful people either naturally or are forced into alignment in their life and career. And it feels like that has naturally happened with you from high school when you started with UPS and you're winding your way through this logistics industry and gaining all of this unbelievable experience where you are an expert today and have significant responsibility today in the part of the industry that is really taking off on the robotic side. It's a fascinating story.
I loved how you put that. I don't know that I could say that for myself, but I really appreciated hearing you say it, how you just said it.
Absolutely. Well, it's very clear. It comes out that way. 2 other interesting things about that story that you were telling me. One is, it sounds like you're telling me that your founder, the founder of Nimble, could not have gotten a job at UPS because he doesn't have a college degree.
Well, he does. He has 2 degrees. So he at least has undergrad and he has a master's
Maybe
level.
we'll edit this part because it sounds better when it says, yeah, our CEO couldn't get a job at UPS.
Well, there's physical labor involved, so he probably wouldn't have signed up for that. So
Love it. That's great. The other interesting part of the story is you probably don't know this, but the DHL story that you're telling and DHL. So DHL, correct me if I'm wrong, DHL still is larger than FedEx and UPS combined in terms of a global footprint logistics company.
especially as a global express provider, yes.
Yeah.
When you go into other parts of the world, there's like 9 DHL trucks to one, 9 out of 10 are going to be a DHL
Yeah.
vehicle.
Yeah.
They have such market penetration in Latin America, Europe, Asia. They just have struggled really in US and Canada have been the 2 markets that really, and I think, again, this is talking way out of turn, but it's the acquisitions, right? Like in Canada, they bought themselves in through Loomis.
Uh-huh.
They shut that down.
Yeah.
US, they bought themselves in through Airborne Express, shut that down.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, the other areas were mostly from the ground up builds. And it's when they tried to piecemeal things together that it seems like it backfired on them a little bit.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that DHL program in the United States was very successful for a period of time. Nobody thought, and you made a good choice thinking, I'm going to go work with DHL. This company can't fail. And then it did, or they decided to pull out of the market.
Well, definitely when you're a publicly traded organization, which they are on, European Stock Exchange,
Mm-hmm.
when you're losing $2 billion US a year, even though they turned $2 billion in profit, they still lost $2 billion in the US market. So
Mhm.
that's not acceptable when you're competing in the capital markets. And so they had to shut it down. in terms of that. Now, me personally thinks it was kind of a cut off your nose to spite your face type of thing. And it was a short term. Yes, they solved $2 billion. But if you look what e-commerce had done just a handful of years later, the biggest thing happened, 08, 09, we had again, election year, very similar to this kind of election year, right?
Yes, very.
And we had gas prices hitting the highest they'd ever been, right around $5. And people were speculating they might get up to 10, right? And so that was one of the biggest cost drivers there. It was a
Sure.
matter of months after they decided to shut down. Gas went down
Right
in the
back
twos
down.
again.
Yeah.
And so yes, they solved 2 years. Them getting to $1 of profit in the U.S. would basically doubled their EBIT.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Let's obviously Ken Allen has been well rewarded for that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he cut the valuation of the business exponentially by getting out of the U.S. marketplace with e-commerce and everything that's going on right now, to limit themselves to the largest market in the world, to just time definite imports and exports. I think really was a short-sighted view for them.
Yeah. Well, another interesting part of that story is when DHL shut down, UPS picked up, I think it was the top 3 DHL resellers at the time, and made agreements with them. The USPS developed their reseller program at that same time and also went after high quality DHL resellers,
Mm-hmm.
2 of which happened to be in the state of Utah. That is the genesis of eHub, getting aligned with one of those USPS reseller contracts way back when DHL left the market. So that's where we have our footprint, is
Okay.
right from the beginning of the USPS reseller program as a result of DHL going out of
Yeah,
business.
no, it's crazy. And, it obviously awesome for you guys that you were able to
It was
capitalize on
amazing.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I think it would have been a different trajectory for a lot of industry. But what's also interesting is how much rate increase happened the next year when you lost the fourth competitor in here. Nobody wanted to do business with DHL back then.
Mhm.
There was always a saying like, nobody gets fired for making FedEx and UPS decisions, but they'll get fired for making a DHL decision. So nobody wanted to use them. But after they left, they sure wish they had, because the buying control changed exponentially.
Absolutely. That was an interesting result of all of that came down. In fact, in our history, we're not going to talk about, we have an interesting portion of our history when an acquisition occurred in our business and how that affected the marketplace, which was fascinating. I'll just say it was the Stamps acquiring Indicia,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really meaningful in the history of our company and obviously the industry. It sounds like you had a little bit of background. I was listening to some of the stuff you were talking about, and you've been kind of forced into coaching, but maybe you've had kind of an athletics background that growing up, although you said it was not necessarily team sport background.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up coaching. I love and hate coaching, and my wife's gonna laugh if she ever listens to this, because every time I come home after a game we lose, or at the end of a season, I'm like, don't ever let me sign this thing up. But then I'm back at it again. But yeah, to your point, so growing up, my parents were really big on us having an activity and a sport.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't care what level. They just felt like we needed to do those things because, well, they had 3 boys and they were bouncing off the walls and they were going to kill each other. And back then a lot more, it was okay to like punch people, and interactions were different, I think, than today a little bit.
Yes. I don't know. I kind of long for the good old days.
There was a lot of fist fights in my house, to put it mildly. But, so I always tell my kids, like, I never made a team that I ever had to try out for. Like every time I tried out for a team was cut. A lot of it's my own doing. I never put in effort ahead of it. I just showed up and was like, thought like having some level of athletic ability, you'd be able to muscle your way in. So I didn't try out often, as you can, as a matter, when you're like, every time you try out, you don't do it. I kind of quit early, but I was fortunate that we got in as an entire family very young into BMX racing,
Hmm.
and that was my sport from really elementary school, like age 7,
Mm-hmm.
all the way through college. I raced very competitively BMX across the country.
Really?
Yes, dirt tracks,
Yeah.
not pedal bikes, not
Yeah.
motorized,
Yeah.
not freestyle. I wasn't doing backflips or any of that stuff, but similar ties. And so we traveled all over the country as a family, and we, all the, a lot of our family memories are tied to that. So definitely BMX racing. And then my other sports that I excelled in were cross training for BMX. So things like cross country and track and skiing and things that I did very well in, all individual sports.
Mm-hmm.
And you get as much out of it as you put into it. So if you want to be the best at it, you put in the work, and nobody else to blame but you. So when you go out and you lose, it's on you. You didn't put the work in. It's sometimes in team sports, you could have the best athlete on the floor and a team not pull their weight, and you don't
That's
win,
right.
right? It takes a lot. And so
Yeah.
I think some of it, though, as I was joking earlier, I think there is some component of I didn't play well with others as a kid. I think that, but now I do love team sports minus the parental politics. It is brutal,
It's ridiculous.
absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
But a good shameless plug that I will throw out there. Yesterday, we happened to
Uh-huh.
win the flag football championships in our age bracket for sixth grade. I've got triplets that are now in sixth grade. I have 2 boys and a girl, all 3 on that team. And so that was fun. It basically, the way we treat flag football in our house is, think like what you do at the elementary school at recess time,
Mm-hmm.
with 2 exceptions. You have a coach and you have referees. Outside of that, it
It's
is
just,
lighthearted and fun.
oh, that's
And
great.
and if we win, we win, and if we lose, we lose. And we still, despite that, we still have our ups and we have our downs. But for the most part, I got 7 or 8 really talented athletes that are, their top sport is like soccer or basketball or football or all of those, and they're high pressure, high stakes, club soccer, club
Yep.
basketball.
All this stuff.
We come out here, we don't practice. We show up 15 minutes before the game. We just loosely throw the ball around a little bit. I make plays on a whiteboard. This is like my 6th or 7th season.
Mhm.
This is the first time, almost all the same athletes, first time we won a championship. And so kids, you would have thought I gave them $1,000,000. They got a ring at the end of it. 6-ish seasons with that, almost the same group of kids. We finally put a championship on. So probably one of the, the least, it's the lowest level sport that any of my kids play in, but probably the most excitement of an achievement that happened yesterday.
Amazing.
So yeah.
Yeah. Sounds like a very Dabo Swinney type of win.
Oh, I'm so glad you snuck in that name too. That's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to talk about Dabo in a minute. I have feelings about Dabo.
I do too. So I'm glad hopefully they're both positive.
Well, probably maybe on one side, but we'll get into that. Okay. Let me go back, because I think something you said about your BMX career and your individual sport career is super meaningful, and I wish people would incorporate it more in their lives today. I don't think we see it enough, but you said something like, I'm paraphrasing, there's no one to blame. If you don't do the work, then you don't get the result. And is that a way that you've built your life, your career? Is that a lesson that you teach others?
Well, I think definitely. I think one thing I do want to expand upon in BMX, we grew up very humble, super blue collar. I don't realize how hard it was for my parents to give us what we had until I look back and see things. But I paid for my own BMX racing by doing the maintenance at the BMX track. So every time it would rain and all the ruts would wash, I would dig up the dirt to shovel it back up onto it and hand rake and hand shovel.
Mm.
So it's also, I think, is not only the effort to, but when it means more to you, when you're the guy sweeping the track and everybody else just shows up and races, but you know every nook and cranny and every detail of it. I just had so much more invested in that sport than anything, because I paid all of my way. I bought my own bike. I paid for all of my races. And then we lived like 3.5 miles to the track. I rode probably 90% of my time from my house 3.5 miles on a BMX bike to then go work on the track or ride at the track and then ride 3.5 miles back. So I would live there basically when it wasn't raining in the summertime. So there's more to it than just that, but absolutely it is. I think just most people in general, especially young people, don't realize we see all this fame that happens in social media, and we see all the highlight reel. but that's just a moment in time.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
thousands and tens of thousands of hours of blood, sweat, tears, losses, injuries, frustrations, whatever, whether it's sports or not, that go into all of that. So I think those things help me. And then I also think loading and unloading trucks in this industry and being in 120-degree trailers in the middle of August, loading. I was a thin guy. I didn't have this lovely physique that I had 20, 30 years ago, but I was super thin. And somehow my first 30 days, I started August 7th, so hottest month of the year. They would seal those trailers up all day for security reasons. So they'd open them up and it's like an oven.
That feels good.
I
Sauna.
lost like 25 pounds in my first 30 days there, and I didn't have 25 to lose. And so I think those things of being at the very bottom, taking out trash, washing the trucks, loading the trailers, unloading the trailers on a night shift. And then a few times I made the mistake of signing up for the early morning shift. And you just really, it changes how you think of things. So I think that's where my success, and because I've always sold primarily in transportation related industries, and I knew the ins and outs of what I was selling, and I believed in it because it was like the dirt in the track. It was those packages in the trailer. It was a different belief system what I was selling.
You were invested. I think
Yes.
that's the word you used. You were invested, and because you were invested, loading the trucks and managing the track, it was more meaningful to you.
Yep.
We had a person on the podcast. His name is Jan Newman. He's a legend in software here in the state and probably outside of the state. He's been in it for almost 40 years. And one of the companies he started, the person who funded the company up front at a critical point in the company said to Jan, well, you have to put some money in. And Jan's, eventually put money in, but that was a big decision for him.
Yeah.
But Jan said that was the best thing that ever happened to him. Almost exactly like you said, because when he was invested, it was more meaningful. And so if you, as a manager of people, as an example, can show people how investment makes your work more meaningful, and then that just levels up everything that you do. I think that's a secret that you have discovered.
Yeah, it is.
It's great. It's unbelievable. It's a great story. I love it. Let me ask you this about the coaching side, because now you're involved in I know younger kids, but you're coaching in a team sport atmosphere. As a coach, what are the lessons that you've learned working with these kids, drawing up game plans, strategy, effort, sacrifice, whatever it is? What are the lessons you've learned as a coach that you can apply to your business life?
Wow. It's a lot. I started legitimate. I started coaching all the way when my kids were 4 in soccer. That almost drove me out of coaching. Think about it. I said I had triplets, so 3 kids.
I know that. I know that too.
It was wiping tears and wiping butts, and back then you signed up for the fall and the spring.
Yes. Yeah.
I quit at the end of the fall. I said some other parent needs to go. I had 3 kids on it. They didn't want to be there. We were 2 years too early, so on. So anyway, I almost got out. So it took me a long time to get back into coaching because of that traumatic experience with my 3 in the early days of soccer. And then got into basketball again, very reluctantly, had a son make the basketball team who now is not able to make the basketball team. He's the kids have passed him by. He's got a whole bunch of things in his life that are challenging for him, but he made it in a year that just happened to be the right mix of kids came out. They took everybody and there was no coach. And I'm like, man, this guy might not. And here's where and I'll probably choke up on this one, is I tried to encourage him not to try out. And because I did not want him to get hurt, because I knew what level he was at, and shame on me because he would have missed out on an experience. And so, and again, a guy that I tried out twice for basketball, never made it, and had far more skill than this guy, and I wanted to chase him away from that. And so definitely look back at that and glad that he still went out for it and went after something. And so I signed up after that and said, I'm going to coach. And then I coached 2 years in a row with that team. And some of the things that I learned from there is that you need to listen to people. And you can't manage everybody the same way, because some people want to be yelled at, some people want to be patted on the back, some people want to have some type of motivational encouragement to string them along, and so if you only do the yelling, you're missing half or a third of your team, and if you don't yell, you're missing that group, and so you really do need to manage at an individual level to get maximum output across the
Mm,
team. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things. The other thing is you have to remember that they're like 10, 11, 12.
mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm in there and like the game plans were drawn up and I can't believe you didn't execute this. And it makes you remember you need to explain things like it's a 12-year-old, even to some of our adults.
That's
Like,
so great.
just because I'm an expert at something doesn't mean the people on my team are.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy for me to just be like, oh, you just do this, and just say like, hey, just go shoot the shot.
Yeah.
Well, I
Step up
don't
and
know
shoot.
how to hold the ball. I don't know where to release it. I don't know how to stand my feet where they should be. But in your mind, it's like, just shoot the shot. And the same thing in sales, it's like, hey, just call the customer. Well, what do I say to the customer? Like, or how do I get that meeting? Or what, like all those different things. So you have to be able to explain that to people like they're 12 and remember that they're young in it. So I've got young people on my team
Mm-hmm.
very early in their careers that are going to have trajectories way beyond mine, but they're only a couple years into where they're at. And
Mm-hmm.
so I can't just be like, well, go do that. Go get the deal done. Sign the contract. Well, what does it take to get that contract? Like all those different things. So I think that's been the biggest thing is making sure that you can explain all the steps and all the details and break it down for them.
It's great. It's great because some people, you'll say that. You'll say, go get the deal done. And they'll go get the deal done. And you're like, I'm a great manager.
Yeah.
Look
Right.
at me. I'm an amazing manager. But the lesson from coaching is you're losing a lot of potential greatness by not taking the time to make sure everybody understands the process. There are guys that are, and females, I meant that
No, yeah,
universally,
yeah.
that are just, can just figure it out. That maybe that's their superpower. They just figure it out. But there are plenty of people who don't want to ask the question, see the superstar doing it, but have all of this potential that never gets tapped unless you take the time to have that different relationship with him. It's so great. It's perfect. It's exactly what you should get out of coaching and
Absolutely.
understanding people.
And not to belabor this, but I'll add one more point is I also think people need to know you care.
Yes.
And you really do need to invest your time and ask simple questions like, how was your weekend? How's the family doing? Know the kids' names, know whatever's going on. And like, for example, we have a guy who just had a knee surgery.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to make sure like he's freaking out about all this stuff. Hey, you're on PTO. Don't even reach out while you're off. And on top of it, just sent a little like gift card for Chipotle so that he could get some food delivered to him. It's $25, but that is worth $1 million to somebody that is worried about taking 2 days off because we got a bunch of deadlines,
Mm-hmm.
and he's mad at himself for having a hockey injury that hurt himself and off the job stuff. And it's like, you know what? Like I want you to have a life outside of work, and I want you to excel. But those little things, like you do need to know what's going on with your people that you work with and you interact with, and
Yeah.
sometimes those little questions. And I think take it out of work. I think it's life in general. I think we've gotten so busy. And I think some of the biggest changes that happened post-COVID is relationally we're really challenged,
Very.
and there's almost a societal distrust right now. Like everybody's like out to get me, or like I don't want to share.
Yeah.
And so we just go through the motions all the time, and we rarely get together. Like just like to your point, like getting together and having a podcast in person is night and day than us. We could have done this on Zoom.
We could have.
Night and day.
It's not as good.
But we're missing that out. And I think, in society, we do need to take the time, slow it down, get engaged, come to people's offices again,
Yes.
meet up in person. And I'm not saying like this isn't like everybody go back to the office full-time message, but we do need to connect. And in those connections, we do need to care and understand. And I think that's why we're seeing so many challenges, with people are isolated with all of this technology that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
We're more isolated and distant than we've ever been, even though we've got hundreds, if not thousands of friends in all these different social environments.
No, it's so important. COVID, generations are suffering because of the lack of personal interaction
Yep.
through COVID. And we need to figure out a way to get back to that. It's extremely meaningful. We were in a situation in our office where we had a core group of people that stayed active in the office, and we never really had people working from home as much, as significantly. And when it finally was over, everybody was back in the office. It's meaningful. Culture is supremely important to us. And if you have a group of individuals you manage who believe, one, you have to care about them. And two, if they believe that you care about them, it's a game changer because, as we know, culture eats strategy for lunch. If you have the right culture, you can achieve unbelievable things. Sounds like you already know this.
I know this, and I do want to give you a shout out because I interact with a lot of people on your team, and they are bought in your company top to bottom in what you guys are doing, and it shows in how they interact when they go on the road and they're at trade shows and how they stuff. And I know you guys did a video recently about like culture and stuff like that.
Yes.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, it's great.
And I don't think there was anything fake or made up about anything because I know a lot of the people that were on that video. So I just want to say that the things that you think are happening, I see as an outsider, as a partner to your business, happening at a maybe even more so than you think.
Well, we feel pretty fortunate, and sometimes we're not exactly sure how we did it, but we're just going to keep trying to do it because culture is super meaningful. I love your backstory. I love all of this stuff leaning up to where we are today, and it's so clear why you do well at what you do. Just your life experience and the lessons that you've learned. Amazing story. Let's transition a little bit to, I almost don't want to, but let's talk about Nimble.
Hey, no, that's what we're here for. Let's do it. I think we say Dabo Sweeney, but
let's
Nimble's
talk about
good too.
that's coming up. That's coming up. Don't you worry. I just want to give you a little opportunity to tell the Nimble story, and I'm just going to try to direct it. You tell the story. But if I'm thinking about Nimble and I don't know much about what you do, and I'm in this shipping, I have a product and I need to ship, I need to get it. I have all these demands from my customers and I want to take care of everybody. What does Nimble do? What is the thing that Nimble provides to people who are looking for shipping and logistics expertise?
Well, I mean, simplistically, we're giving you an easy button to outsource all of those tasks. Everything from your manufacturer's dock all the way to your customer's doorstep and everything in between. And so the simplest thing is we're providing a service of pick, pack, and ship and delivery. And we're doing it very differently, and we've redesigned it to be scalable and future-proof. And I talk a lot about, and maybe not as publicly, but at least internally, about obsolescence of what's happening in 3PL. And I really think the traditional 3PL model of a whole bunch of people doing a whole bunch of manual things is going to look and feel very much like Blockbuster Video and Netflix. And we all loved going to Blockbuster Video, loved it.
So great.
I mean, my Friday nights were spent, half of it was just about picking out the movie, right? But eventually we got sick of standing 30 minutes, 40 minutes, hours trying to their empty wall. Now I got to watch some B movie because I didn't get here early enough. But I mean by that,
Harry Met Sally, and then you have to end up with whatever.
Yeah, something that you did not want to do, but you left with something. You spent, you were invested, so you left with something for sure.
Absolutely.
And I was crazy. I had this weird thing. It was like Friday night movie night, watch it on Friday, and I'd wake up first thing in the morning and watch it a second time. I don't know why, because now I don't do anything twice in a row. I hate even preparing for meetings because I want to just be in the meeting and do it. I just hate repetitive stuff. But as a kid, I lived for Friday night movie, watch it again on Saturday morning so I could memorize the lines and be able to talk about it on Monday.
You had to turn it back in.
That's it. And there's that. And I wanted to get my money's worth.
Right.
Wanted to get my money's worth. So anyway, get sidetracked there, but to say, I really think that, not having automation, not having robotics in a warehouse environment is going to be death to a lot of 3PLs because the cost of the building and the cost of the people is just going up exponentially. And so with us shrinking that building down as much as 4x smaller buildings than our peers with 8x less people in the building, really helps us control the controllables. Like the three biggest
Mm,
costs that everybody faces that's running a warehouse, whether you're your own operator or your 3PL or whatever the case may be, is it's the people, it's the building, and ultimately transportation. And
hmm.
transportation is the greatest of the three,
Yeah.
which is why we invest in a network and we're building. We built three. We're going to continue to put more pins on the map.
Right.
Eventually we'll, who knows how many we'll put. Ideally, we'd love to be in the top 25 markets if we had our way. And because transportation is everyone that does business with us, probably 70 cents of every dollar is spent on that last mile local delivery.
Yeah.
It's expensive. You guys know you're in a
Absolutely.
transportation company. So that those are probably as like simplistically as I can put it, but it's totally different, right? Imagine, all those warehouses you've been into, racks, aisles, wasted space above you. The last 10, 15 years of most warehouse automation has forced the building to be bigger. It's only been focusing on the labor component of it, which is great because labor's been challenging and it's been expensive and quality's going down, availability's going down. But if you're also increasing your building cost to decrease your labor costs, you're not in a winning equation there.
Nope.
So one of the things that I love the most about our story is we are optimizing the building and the people at the same time.
Hmm.
I work 30 feet high in all of my buildings. I have no racks. I have no aisles. There's no empty space to heat and cool.
No pickers.
No pickers, and that's like 65% of the average warehouse in e-com
Hmm.
is a picker role. Like that's like 2/3 of the labor is picking. It's
Yeah.
it's slow. And especially, the bigger the warehouse and especially in apparel where there's high SKUs and lots of units per order, it's a very slow picking path.
Yeah.
And so for
Absolutely.
us to be able to automate that, and then the other thing is like we're not stopping where we're at. We have this, I said it early in the discussion that we have this end-to-end autonomous vision of being end-to-end autonomous supply chain company,
Hmm.
and that doesn't so we solve pick. We're working on solving pack,
Hmm.
but we're also going to solve loading trailers, unloading trailers, decanting. So that's getting the items out of the box,
Hmm.
the induction, all of that automated. And we're eventually going to put robots on the road in delivery vehicles. That's where we're going.
Wow.
And so we have a huge trajectory, but we're different than everybody else today because we're vertically integrated,
Hmm.
hardware manufacturer, software and systems developer, and we're truly our own operator as a 3PL. It's not a 4PL, it's not a 5PL.
Yeah.
We're truly our own operator. And so that looks and feels different. And so we do have a hard time, competing sometimes and selling that story because 7 of the people in the RFP look exactly the same. And then there's Nimble out here doing this
Oh,
very different thing. And that
yeah.
sometimes feels weird. And I don't want to go on, but eventually what we're doing is going to be the norm. And then I'm going to have a leg up because I'm building it in-house with one hardware stack and one software system
Yeah.
and a robot that is multitask and a single type of robot that can do multiple activities.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to have all this complexity versus if even the companies that are investing in automation, because there are
Sure.
good 3PLs that are leaning heavy into technology, but they're leaning heavy into somebody else's technology. They've got 5, 6 different types of systems, 4 or 5 different types of software. Then they got to bring in some master software to put them all together
Right.
to avoid the islands of automation. That is inefficient and adds cost, although it is more efficient than
Then
not doing anything.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a couple things in that story I'd like to hit on. One is you mentioned, you provide this level of efficiency that companies don't gain on their own. So, and it makes sense because there are lots of people who are building a product, and their product, that like the product is the king. Shipping and logistics is like the necessary evil. And so we run into it very regularly. They just don't get it right. And we're always in a position where we're trying to help drive efficiencies
hmm
because we feel like we're the expert. They're the expert in their product, but let us help you be the expert in moving your product. And you guys take it to a different level, moving the product efficiently and cost effectively
Yeah,
and with a smaller footprint,
absolutely.
which is amazing.
Well, the good thing about this, and we don't talk enough about it, is all of those things equate to a very sustainable supply chain.
Mm.
Much smaller building.
Hmm.
Most of the impact of sustainability actually is coming with the building itself and all the trades and all the construction stuff that goes into it. So we run a much smaller building. I heat and cool a much smaller building. I have less lights. I have all these different things. And then I've got a fraction of the people driving, so I don't have all that CO2 from, people commuting to and from work and congestion on the roads. And then if we, when we put inventory spread across all 3 locations, on average, we're reducing mileage of last mile delivery by 550 miles.
Wow.
That's
significant.
Big impact.
No
Absolutely.
doubt. Amazing. The other thing I wanted to ask you about in that story is you mentioned it a couple times now, but there's no pickers on the floor, and you mentioned less people. So how do you reconcile that? Because obviously we want everybody to have a good job and a nice job, and it sounds like you're reducing the workforce fairly significantly.
Well, yes and no. And so 2/3 of my company is engineers, software developers, et cetera. So very skilled, high dollar individuals. And we're getting rid of the tasks that nobody else is wanting to sign up for. So interestingly enough, one of the big transportation CEOs a couple years ago was fortunate enough to be in a meeting and was sharing about how, this was like several peak seasons ago, and they were down 90,000 employees going into peak season. And they had said coming out of COVID, 10 million people in their typical workforce from 45 to 55 left the workforce in COVID and are not coming back. 10 million, 45 to 55, not coming back. Traditionally, you would replace that with a lower, younger group.
Sure.
18 to 25, nobody's entering and signing up to do, this blue collar work of picking and packing and shipping.
They don't want to load the truck?
They don't want to load the truck. They do not want to load the truck.
Because that's where you started.
No, and I don't blame them. I don't want to load that truck either. Like I don't want to be in that sweaty, hot vehicle. But also, most people don't want to start at the bottom anymore. I think that's why entrepreneurship is so in vogue right now, is because everyone's going to college and be the CEO.
Yeah.
Like there's not this work your way, cut your teeth, learn and grow, do 18 different jobs and figure it out and get to the top. Like it's like I graduated, now I want to be the CEO, right? So there's it's not that we're taking away jobs, it's people aren't coming to work for those jobs. So we're being forced to do it. And at the same time, we're growing our headcount and our people. Every time I put a warehouse up, I've got, construction teams, I've got manufacturing jobs that we do. So we're creating jobs, and everybody that's leaned into robotics, I don't care who you look at, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Walmart, Target, et cetera, all running tons and tons of robotics, and all have 500,000 to 1 million and 1.5 million employees and still growing headcount. So
So it sounds like you're saying as robotics automation has increased, headcounts are still increasing.
Still increasing.
Okay.
Just different types of jobs.
And it's a different level employee. You're talking about engineers, technicians, developers that you're employing to run all of these. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I think those are things you can get a career out of. It's really hard to get a career out of being a picker or a packer. Sure. I mean, there are people that do it, and hopefully none of this I said is not degrading anybody. Like these are all good jobs, but nobody's coming for them anymore.
Yeah.
And so we're at that point where we need to automate things. And so we will continue to add more people.
Yeah.
They're just going to be at a different level, and we will continue to grow headcount. It's just, like to your point, it's going to be a technician. It's going to be, it's going to be systems developers. It's going to be,
it's great.
More critical type functions.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Okay. Let me ask you this question. Would you be as successful as you are today if you hadn't gone through that whole path of loading the truck job and working your way all the way to where you are today?
Me personally, no. And I do worry some about my kids.
Yeah.
I do. And, because I worked nights all through college. And so I had a very different college, even though I did try to do as many traditional collegiate things as possible. Monday through Friday, I went to work at 4 p.m. and got home 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And so I'm glad that I had to pay for my own school, and I'm glad that I had to work there, because I watch a lot of good kids show up either on a scholarship or show up on a parent scholarship and drink themselves out. And I'm not so sure that I wouldn't have been one of those guys.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I had to work to it. And the nice thing about it is when I got to the end of, my senior year, I had a job waiting for me at a phenomenal company, and people were scrambling. So for me, I put so much of my success on having to go through that. It's being invested in those
Absolutely.
things. And so I do try to find ways to get my kids to have hardship, because everything's easy right now. I mean, the internet's always working, the power's always on.
Yeah.
You know,
Food's always available. I mean, it's
everything's
just,
on demand now, right?
yeah.
They didn't have to wait for Friday night line up a TV or Sunday night line up a TV, and oops, we can't go out to our friends because we're going to miss TV or we're going to record it. Like
Yeah.
that whole appointment TV thing. So life is very differently. So like things that we've instituted in our house is like there's chores with dollars assigned to them,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to do those things, and they have to do it at some level of my level of expectation. Maybe not to what I would do if I was doing it myself, but you can't just like fake it and hope you get paid on it. And so we're I'm signing tasks. They cut the grass.
Yeah.
They're doing the cleaning and the bathrooms and the kitchens and on a weekly basis throughout theirs, and we're tying dollars to it. And then I'm also making them save 10%, give 10% for giving. So like when
Yeah.
the school asks for a handout or church asks for a handout, or wherever, or they see something that they get excited about, that they take that 10% and they work for it, and they get to participate in that. So
Yeah.
I am trying to at least teach financial education, the value of the dollar.
Yeah.
It's hard,
Very.
especially with everything being electronic now.
I know.
And I got forced into giving my kids a phone this year at almost 13, and I made them sign a contract.
Oh, that's new.
Yes, this thing is gorgeous. 'Cause I said, listen, if I'm going, like I'm fighting this kicking and scream, I don't want you to have phones, but I built a contract, and I said, this is like a legitimate life contract.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is the starting point. This is the first contract you're going to sign in your life, and when you put pen to paper, it means something. And so it spells out like all the disciplinary actions. Like I don't have to say anything. It's like, just bring me your phone. Like you lost your phone for X amount of time. They pay for their phone service. We got them on like a Mint Mobile. It's like $4 a month, but they're paying.
Amazing.
So out of their,
That's the Ryan Reynolds deal.
that's
right?
the Ryan Reynolds deal.
Yeah,
Love
why
that
not?
guy. Yeah,
Wrexham,
absolutely.
Mint,
Yeah,
Deadpool. I mean, that guy's just on
he's
fire.
killing it. He's absolutely killing it. So my kids, what used to be $10 is now $6 that they get in their chores, because $4 is coming off the top each week to go pay for their phone
Well,
bill.
that will teach you a lesson.
Yes.
That will absolutely teach you a lesson.
Yep.
I love that. Well, and I'm all for entrepreneurs and guys dropping out of college and starting a fantastic company. But the truth is, even those guys need people who have life experience and specifically working with and managing people. You just can't get around the life lessons. And if you want to build culture and a great company, I think you have to understand that. So what you're teaching, what you've been through, I feel the same way. It's all of the things that I've been through have been significant in where I've landed in my career. I don't know if I'm successful yet. Hopefully. Keeping my fingers crossed. Okay. I'm gonna stop there for a minute, because I think it's time for 3 random questions.
Oh boy.
Do you follow like NFL, NHL, NBA?
NFL
MLB?
mostly, collegiate especially, not really NHL or NBA
Gotcha.
or MLB. I can't. do
Okay, so if you're
162 games.
following NFL, are you Team Kelsey or Team Swift?
Well, definitely not a Swiftie, so I guess it ultimately puts me on Team Kelsey.
Is it more likely that Travis Kelsey wins 2 more Super Bowls in his career, or that he takes the name Swift when he and Taylor get married?
I think it's more likely he has like 5 Super Bowl rings before that, and it's not that he wouldn't take her name.
Well, he would be
I think
smart
it's
if he
I think
did.
it's her track record, and she wouldn't have any more music to put out.
This is my point exactly.
She can't afford to marry.
This is the perfect relationship, because she's going to end her tour soon. She needs some material. She needs another album. And guess who's going to be prominent?
I think it's going to be him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's going to be him as well.
But a little vote of confidence. If anybody could do it, I think he could do it.
Do you?
I mean, he's kind of a man's man. I mean, he's a big deal.
He is kind of a big deal. Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's talk Clemson.
Yes, definitely.
You're a Clemson guy.
Through and through. I went there 2000, 2004. Tommy Bowden was the football coach. We were terrible. top 10 recruiting classes, and we couldn't win more than 8 or 9 games anytime I was there.
Yeah.
They actually added a bowl game so Clemson could go to a bowl game one year in Idaho on the blue field. It was
Yeah,
called
the
the
famous potato bowl.
famous potato bowl. Yes.
Yes. We're
Yes.
very familiar.
All
Very
those birds going to die on that field.
Yes, the Ducks
Yes.
regularly turf themselves, literally,
Yes.
on the blue turf. Would you rather Clemson win a national championship in football if they had to lose to South Carolina for the next 30 years?
Oof. I think I'd take owning the state championship for the next 30 years. I mean, we talk about it in front, it's a big to-do. They're not as good. At least they had a little bit of a run there when they won a bunch there when they had the old ball coach, Steve Spurrier.
Oh,
He owned the first 6 years of
I loved
Dabo.
him.
He almost cost it. Dabo almost didn't become the Dabo that he is because of Steve Spurrier. He owned him, and he trash talked Dabo every turn he could get.
yeah.
But yes, that in-state rivalry is pretty nasty. One thing that I do remember when I was at Clemson, we happened to beat the Gamecocks 63-17. It was brutal. I mean, I actually saw people in my work at UPS basically get in a fist fight over that game because
Oh, yeah.
some were Clemson and some were Gamecocks.
Yeah.
Like, it was bad.
You don't mess
Like,
with rivalries.
People got split. Friends got broken up because we ran it down there, and it was there. It was at South Carolina, which was like a double, like,
Ooh.
yeah, like a double exclamation point. But yeah, we ran it up on them and ran
Yeah.
it up big.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you mentioned Dabo Swinney. I'm a big college football guy. I've tried. I can't get aligned with Dabo Swinney. So you're going to have to help me here.
Okay.
Is he, what percentage is he real and what percentage is he acting when he gives his, because I feel like he's 10% real and 90% he's rehearsed all of this stuff.
I think he's 101% authentic. I think there's another guy, you want to talk about being invested. I mean, he grew up homeless. He had his mom living in his dorm room when he was going to Alabama because she didn't have a place to live. And so he figured things out the very, very hard way. Walk-on player to become a scholarship player, was a positions coach to become the head coach without ever being a coordinator. So I know sometimes it's folksy and hokey, but I think that's a Southern guy that's a blue collar guy that is still pinching himself every day that he's doing what he's doing. But you want to talk about all the things we talked about as far as investing in people. Their philosophy down there is I'm thinking about them and coaching them to be 35-year-old men, and winning for them really is a byproduct. They're investing in them in so many levels. They've added so many things to the school around entrepreneurship, around leadership, faith things to get involved for those that are looking for something bigger than that. They've got this center of excellence, and the way they're doing things with NIL and transfer portal. I know it's been pushed in his face, but he wants people to come be there for 3, 4, or 5 years at a clip, and wants to be able to invest in them because he's not sacrificing these guys to just get one more championship. He's really thinking about how are these guys going to think about me at 35, 45, and is putting leaders of men out there. And so, he's not for everybody, but I will say 101% authentic in the things he says. And I think you just get him, and he just is so excited about that team and what they're doing. And, he really now, actually in the last couple of years with them losing 2 and 3 year lost seasons for 3 years in a row, that's better than any season when I was there, but the fan base is turned on him. And he's talking about, his perception now. And what he's talking about is that, the expectation is greater than the actual outcome itself. And so nobody's ever going to be happy.
Right.
And I think that's kind of a whole, just, talking about some of the societal things we were talking about, we're making things so much bigger than they really are.
Sure.
And we're not enjoying the ride to get there because we want to be able to put that picture up on whatever and not focused in the moment and stuff like that. So, he's not for everybody, but I'm glad that 2 things have happened, with Clemson is somebody named the naming rights to the marketing department, which is where I went to school, which I graduated from. when I was there, the joke, so they're a big engineering school. So
Mhm.
the joke was, if you were marketing, is what engineering program did you drop out of to get into marketing? I legitimately went there to go into marketing. So a handful of years after, somebody put an endowment on it, and they capped the people. They couldn't start until junior year. You had to have a certain GPA. So like my marketing degree all of a sudden got like
Wow,
super
really,
powerful.
really valuable.
And then Clemson got put on the roadmap under what's been happening with Dabo and the team. And now basketball, Brad Burnell's had a nice little run at it.
Right.
And so now it's a national product. And so I couldn't get into the school itself, the whole university, and I couldn't get into the actual business school that I was a part of either. So I'm fortunate I went to when I went there
Yeah.
in 2000s. And all the way to the point, I only wanted to go to one school. Well, I shouldn't say that. I picked out 4 schools. I started in a community college. I was paying my way. Was going outside of Scranton. Just picked out 4 schools, put them in order. It was Clemson. It was University of Texas. It was somebody out in California that I'm blanking on, and somebody in Rhode Island that I'm blanking on. Long story short, I went to Clemson. Never went anywhere else. I submitted one application, and then it came back denied. After all the acceptance dates are in, and I'm going, what am I doing now? And I took a semester off because when I went with Clemson, they said, don't take any more classes. We're not going to accept any of your credits. And so I figured out a way to type up a letter that read the right way, that got in front of the right person,
Yeah.
and got it in front of a review board. And so several weeks later, they reversed it. Well, I hung that letter over my desk for the entire time I was at school, saying they didn't want you here. and that was my like chip on the shoulder. So very similar to how Dabo Sweeney is, like, he's, even when they were number one, he's always like, nobody respects us. It's us,
Yeah.
us versus them. I did the same thing in my time there to take that letter as a
Yeah.
motivational driver. So
Well, you've convinced me. You hit all of the boxes. You checked off all of the boxes. And now Dabo may be my favorite. Well, that's not true. Coach Whittingham at the University of Utah is my favorite coach.
I don't blame you there. Yeah.
And now I'm gonna look at Dabo in a different light. That's
Please
a great
do.
story.
Yeah.
And I love the story about his mom living in the dorm with him.
It's
Like,
crazy.
you just don't know about that background.
Yeah.
And so that's significant. We're talking about, overcoming obstacles and how significant that is in your life and in people's lives. And there you go. There's Dabo.
Well, and I think it's also really important too, because like, just because you start someplace doesn't mean that's where you're going to end. And a lot of times people can, get stuck in this circular loop of like, my parents are this way, so I'm going to be this way.
Sure.
And you have to eventually break that cycle. And, and so he's a perfect example of that. Had an alcoholic father, didn't know him until, a few years before he died, and reconnected and forgave him and all the stuff like that. But to come from where he came from, and then to think that he gets paid $10+ million a year, like, amazing. And so
Great
that's
success
the beauty
story.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and he clearly is a culture guy. I'm a culture guy.
Big time.
We're aligned.
Yeah. So you
We're
got that
very
going
aligned.
for you.
Absolutely. Well, I just have a few more things I want to ask you. I just want to tell you up front, this has been so insightful, such meaningful content. I think people are going to love the lessons that you've talked about.
I hope we break it into small sound bites, because what I found is nobody has any
Time. I know.
Nobody will listen past 90 seconds. So this might need to be 90 episodes when it's all said and done. But this was by far one of the most enjoyable podcasts. And I think it's
Oh, you're
because we
nice.
did it in person.
Let me just end up on kind of, I love to do this. I love to understand people's motivations and where they learned all this stuff. I know we've talked about that a lot, but it feels like to me you're a guy that continues to learn, continues to hone your craft. You've been in sales a long time. You're an expert. How important, how critical is the sales role in an organization?
It's huge. And it's in a tough spot right now. Sales is this, you've got a
Yes.
sales organization. It's really hard to sell right now. It is, there's so much noise. The good of AI are the things we're doing, and the bad of AI is all the sales email junk that we get.
Yes.
And our email boxes are just filled and filled and filled. And so it's really hard to cut through the noise.
Mm-hmm.
But if people don't keep going through the process to chase a no, which is what I see with the current sales process, I'm going to send you 3 emails. Just let me know. Just tell me no. Please break up. You should never start a sales relationship or a business to business relationship with trying to get them to break up with you. You just want to get I learned a long time ago, it's okay if you could just get to somebody's number two, they're gonna be a customer of yours at some point in time. Because number one at some point in time is gonna change.
Mm-hmm.
They'll go out of business, their people leave, pricing changes, they fail, whatever. And so if you're somebody's number two, you can be their number one at some point in time. And so you want to get into these relationships and be able to be willing to go the distance.
Yeah.
Everything's gotten so transactional in sales right now,
Yes.
and especially in software and things, and it's all like, hurry up, sign up today, we're chasing the end of the quarter, chasing the end
Yeah.
and if you can get what I have found to be true is people buy when they're ready to buy, and people are going to buy what they want to buy.
Sure.
And so, and then the other component, is people buy from people they know, like, and trust.
Absolutely.
And so if you don't put a time on it and you continue to build that relationship and build that trust, and you are listening to them in those conversations, and you sell them a solution that solves their problems, you will become their number one at some point in time, and they will be customers for life.
Mm-hmm.
When you chase short-term, quick sales, one-hit wonder, I'm chasing the monthly board, I'm chasing the quarterly board, they're not going to be long-term sticky customers. And so that's the concern about. So anyway, so long-winded answer to say sales is super important. It's the hardest job ever in the last couple of years. It's even harder than it's ever been.
Yeah.
But if it's done well, it's a very rewarding career, because you learn everything. It forces you to always be learning. What worked yesterday is not going to work today.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, like, just like we talk about multi-channel for like sales, like for like e-commerce and selling products,
Mm-hmm.
getting into customers is also multi-channel. There's some people that will only read a LinkedIn.
Sure.
There's some people that will never read a LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Some people like text. Some people hate text. Some people like Calendly. Some people will shoot you if you use Calendly, right? Like there's all these different things. So
Right.
you have to be willing to try different things and not be a one-trick pony, and be like, okay, but we have to break this vicious cycle that we've gotten into in the cadence world of just tell me no. If you're heading into a relationship
Isn't that
for a no,
interesting? Yeah.
then you're doomed from the start.
You're just setting yourself up.
That's exactly
for
it.
the no. And you are a connector. You're a people person. That's still underlying as important as anything in a sales role.
People matter, and here's like things that I do and that I try to get our teams to do is connect when there's nothing in it for you. So one of the things that I've had some of the greatest successes with is helping people find jobs when they're looking for a job, because they're going to take that call from you when you land a job, and ideally you're putting them in a job that you want to get into.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of self-service, but ultimately the only outcome that's really coming from that is getting that person to get in an interview or get a job or get to know about it.
Right.
And so I think that's one area to really build lifelong relationships is pay attention. That's the beauty of LinkedIn, is you find out when they're looking and when they need a new job, and be able to come alongside them and say, hey, what are you looking for? I might know some people.
Yeah.
I'm in your space often. I'll send you LinkedIn's, or if it's somebody I know, I'll send an intro. Or if you notice we have a common connection, feel free to ask me. And if I know them and I can do it, I will do it. Unfortunately, not everybody I'm connected with them I really connected with. So there's that component.
Sure.
So anyway, so there is a little bit of that, but so things like that, like how can I give to get is basically where I'm going with, is like the simplest way. If you need a mantra, give to get. So if I can, broker an intro, if I can give you a customer, like if you're talking partnerships,
Absolutely.
Hey, let me introduce you to one of my customers. They need what you want.
Yep.
And then at some point in time, that person's going to remember you and be like, oh yeah, I heard somebody, they need fulfillment. Let me introduce you to Jonathan and Nimble, or,
Yes.
and same in your world, right? Like, oh, you need shipping. Let's get them in front of eHub and talk to this team. And so partnerships matter, pushing and pulling. If you engage with in partnerships, I try to have our team give a customer before we ask for a customer, and because you want to create value for other people.
Absolutely.
It can't be transactional. It can't all be about you. And when it becomes all about you, all of that stuff fails. Everything.
Sure.
You're not going to get partnerships. You're not going to get customers. So yes, people. It's all about people. It really is about connecting with them. Because a lot of times there's multiple companies that can do what we do, right? Like we're not out, like I'm not the only fulfillment company. You're not the only platform that can do what you do with shipping.
Sure.
obviously we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, but unfortunately, a lot of the customers that we sell to put us in this like box, and they commoditize us really easily.
Yeah.
But you can have your salespeople be the differentiator, and they buy them more so than they're maybe buying your product or my product, but they're buying your people. And so that's when customers start becoming lifelong customers, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I love that story, and the critical nature of relationships with people. People matter. That's important, and it's obviously important in sales. It's important throughout all the levels of an organization, even if just working with people you're at work with every day, just understanding and managing relationships. Okay, one last question. Do you have a life philosophy, or what's the best advice you've ever been given, or best advice you've ever given?
Well, there's so many. I've learned from so many people, and I was listening to a great podcast about this guy that's a very high up MARSOC guy and SEAL and all this stuff. So I've been trying to listen into that lately for just some motivation. But and he was talking about like, hey, he's got a young kid, and he's like, I want my son to be raised by a lot of men. And so I've taken things from all kinds of people, from all aspects of my life. So, but I think, my parents probably for sure have had the greatest impact on me. And I think one of the things that was always, instilled in our family was, no matter what you do, you're doing it for God, everything. So whether you're pushing a broom or you're doing this thing, you're not doing it for anybody, but if nobody's watching, you're still always doing something. God's watching you, you're doing it for God. And if you treat everything like that, you're going to be great at it. And so that's something that I'm sure as a kid, I rolled my eyes at that. We've heard that phrase a bazillion times.
Right.
And I tell my kids that all the time, and I'm sure they're rolling their eyes at me, but eventually they'll catch. But that little insightful thing that, and that's like what I was talking about in the front end of some of our conversation of like, sometimes people don't want to start at the bottom. But if you have that mindset of, it doesn't matter what role you're doing, what job you're doing, what company you're doing it for, who you're doing it for, if you can have that mindset, you can do anything.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I love that. Jonathan, it's been such a pleasure. I've learned so much. People are going to get great value out of this podcast. It's amazing. I know that you're active on LinkedIn. Is that where people should go to find you and find out more about the company?
Oh, for sure. The two simplest things is, Jonathan Briggs on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there. Please interact, please engage. Or also if they're on our website, nimble.ai, there's a contact us form on there as well. But, for sure, hop in, drop a DM, interact with a post, whatever, however, it's a community. I do try to invest in that community, whether it's, sharing content or commenting or communicating different jobs or whatever. So hopefully people will continue to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been fantastic. Jonathan Briggs, Nimble, what a great podcast. Could not appreciate your time more, and looking forward to a long and mutually beneficial partnership.
Same here. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Ship podcast presented by eHub. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.